Hello again and welcome to the Warhammer 40k Morning Glory video. In today's episode, we are going to be looking at Leman Russ loadouts. You see, this venerable tank is probably the most popular in the entire guard, but between multiple different data sheets and a smorgasbord of weapon options, it can be really tricky to know what to pick. What sponsons go with which turret? Should you be taking a whole las cannon or a whole heavy bolter? Well, don't panic, my dear conscripts. Never fear. For Mordian Glory is here, and I'm going to take you through step by step each Leman Russ datasheet and my favorite loadout for each one of those units. So without further ado, let's mount up, roll out, and drive right into today's episode. Now, the first thing that I want to do is go over the shared weapon systems of the Leman Russes. Because whether it's an Eradicator, a Punisher, or a Vanquisher, they can all take the same weapon options. The key here, and as we'll get into this later on in the video, is understanding which weapons go with which tank. Now, every Leman Russ is going to come with its turret, but it's also going to come with a whole las cannon and armored tracks. Now, I want to clarify something here. I'm a bit of an old school player, so you might hear me refer to something as a whole las cannon, or a whole heavy bolter, or a whole heavy flamer. When I'm doing that, I'm talking about the one that goes in the front, at the very front of the tank. It's an old term, but it's just a way of differentiating between the las cannon or the heavy bolt that goes in the front and maybe the heavy bolters that go on the side, which traditionally were called sponson weapons. So it's just a little bit of terminology I want you guys to get familiar with. And if you're looking at the data sheet and you're like, I don't see this whole weapon or the sponsor weapon he's talking about, don't worry about it. If I say sponsons, I'm talking about the guns that you strap onto the side. If I'm talking about hull, I'm talking about the weapon that sticks out the front of the tank, not the one that's in the turret. So like I said, each tank comes with a whole las cannon, and you can swap this for a heavy bolter or a heavy flamer. You can then add on more guns to the tank, and this starts off with the sponson weapons, the guns that go on the sides. These are always paired, so you always take two of the same, and you can either take two heavy bolters, or two heavy flamers, or two multi-melters, or two plasma cannons. You can also take, in addition, a heavy stubber or a storm bolter. This is something that I refer to as like a pintle weapon. It's something that goes on top. It's just a little bit of extra firepower. And then you've got the Hunter Killer Missile, and this is a one-shot pop anti-tank missile, which really just fires off, and it's something that pretty much every guard vehicle can take. And individually, you might look at them and go, oh, it's a one-shot weapon, it's not that good. But don't dismiss your hunter killers. When you start taking them on a lot of vehicles, they do add up some real anti-tank. Now, all of the different hull and sponsor weapons are totally valid depending on what Russ we're looking at. But before we go any further, I just want to acknowledge one hard truth, which is you always, regardless of what Leman Russ you're taking, need to take the Hunter Killer Missile because it's free, so don't leave it at home, it's just free real estate. But secondly, you always want to pick the heavy stubber over the storm bolter. The heavy stubber has a greater overall range. It can hit the targets out to 36 inches, the storm bolter can only go to 24-inch range. The heavy stubber has more shots at long range than the storm bolter. When you get into close range, it has still got more shots than the storm bolter because now it's a rapid fire weapon. There is literally no reason to ever take the storm bolter unless you've already got them modeled on the tank. Fortunately, if you're there looking at your storm bolters and you've just got a single solitary tear coming out of your eye, don't panic too much. This Russ is putting out a lot of firepower. They've got a lot of DACA and a lot of guns. So whether you end up with a storm bolter stubber doesn't really matter. It's not going to have a huge impact. But rather than running a tank at, let's say, 100% efficiency, you're probably running at 95, 99% efficiency. So if you can take the stubbers, do so. But if you can't, don't panic too much. But that covers all of the shared weapon systems, all the options we can take. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty. Each individual data sheet and what loadout I would give each tank. Starting in no particular order, we have the Leman Russ Eradicator first. This is a little bit of a hidden gem. I think a lot of people are overlooking the Eradicator, but I would class this Russ as a close range brawler. This is because of its ability Urban Warfare, which not only allows it to fire its blast main weapon, the Eradicator Nova Cannon, into combat, which normally you just can't do, but it also means as a whole, the entire tank does not suffer the penalty to hit whilst it's in engagement range. Because of this ability and the fact that the Eradicator is pretty cheap and spammable, one of the cheapest tanks you can get right now at 160 points, I kind of see it as a big distraction kind of effect. And it's got just enough firepower where your opponent can't really ignore it, but it's also cheap enough where if it dies, you don't really care. And to help it fulfill this role, I would give it a hull las cannon and multi-melter sponsons. This means that if it does get tied up in combat, those weapons which normally would only be hitting on 5s will still be hitting on 4s, and that gives it a good target for take aim, so it might even still be hitting on 3s, which is brilliant. Can't even tie this thing up in combat. Hitting on 3s with all those weapons, light infantry, heavy infantry, they're not going to survive long against that kind of firepower. It also means that if it does have to engage in a longer range tank duel, that it actually has some strength and AP strapped onto this thing, allowing it to be tactically flexible. It's happy to get wrapped up in combat, but it's also happy to engage in a bit of a firefight. Now, there might be some people here thinking about strapping flamers onto this thing. Traditionally, not a bad choice, but really then you're not taking advantage of urban warfare. So for me, the 10th edition loadout for this would be, like I said, las cannon and multi-melters. Next up, we have the Leman Russ Punisher, the infamous bullet hose of the guard. Now, on the one hand, I'm tempted to try and make this a little bit like a multi-role vehicle, similar to the Eradicator, but I just don't think it's going to do it quite as well. Those shots that the Punisher cannon puts out, they lack any strength, they lack any AP, and I think trying to make this vehicle, which is fundamentally very specialized, and trying to make it generalized, it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like it's going to work. I think if you're going to take a Punisher, you need to go all in. You need to take enough DACA that maybe even the Orcs are going to take a step back. And so my gut instinct here is you go for triple heavy bolter, 1 on the hull, 2 on the sponsons, and then you've got that heavy stubber. In total, what you've got then is 20 shots from the turret, plus another 15 from the heavy bolters and the heavy stubber if you get that stubber within an 18-inch range, giving you a tank that's putting out 35 shots a turn. Many of those shots are going to have sustained hits, and some of them are going to have devastating wounds. If you're going to take a tank that's dedicated for siving down infantry, I think really that's where we need to focus its efforts, and so that's why I just go for all of the bullets I can on the Punisher. After that, we've got the Leman Russ Vanquisher. Now, on the surface, the Vanquisher is an absolutely terrible tank. Its main weapon is so bad you can basically disregard it. It fires 1 shot, and that shot is pretty powerful, but if you miss, that's 20% of the tank's firepower gone for the game from its main weapon. And if the enemy makes a save on an invulnerable save, that's another 20% gone. And if there's a turn where it can't see anything, that's another 20% gone. So the main weapon for the Vanquisher is irrelevant in a funny sort of way. The one thing this has going for it is it's very cheap. It is in fact the cheapest Leman Russ. It's 155 points. If you choose to take this over something like a Leman Russ battle tank, you're saving 25 points. You take 3 of them, you're starting to save 75 points. That's a whole 3 extra unit of something like infantry or Death Corps Krieg or something like that. So the Vanquisher is a very spammable tank. I kind of see it as the tank you take to fill out the armored core if you really want a 4th Russ, but you can't quite afford a good one. As a result, I feel like if you're going to take this thing, it really needs to be treated as like a a budget regular Russ. It's a long-range tank. It needs to be doing damage. And so I see this thing as having a las cannon in the front, because that kind of helps with the Vanquisher cannon, gives you some concentrated anti-tank. But rather than going for the multi-melters here, which are very short range, they don't work with the other weapons. If this thing doesn't want to get up close and personal, I would go for plasma cannons. Plasma cannons are going to give it some good volume of fire, thanks to the blast and the D3 shots. But also, you really don't care if you overcharge and hazardous yourself to death, because the Vanquisher, if it kills itself to death, at least it'll be funny. So I would go for a Vanquisher cannon, of course, las cannon, so you've got a bit of concentrated anti-tank, and then the plasma cannons, which help it do that long-range Daka with good AP, good strength, good damage, and good volume of fire.
Attention guardsmen, this is an announcement by the Departamento Militarum. Element Games is an official sponsor of the Mordian Glory channel. They offer up to 20% off Warhammer 40k and 10% off Bolt Action and other game systems. Use the link down in the description to save money and support the channel. Anyone not using the link will be referred to the local commissariat. Also, don't forget that if you use referral code TIM3921, then you will receive double store credit, saving even more money on your future purchases. That's all for now. Fallout!
Moving on, we have the Leman Russ Demolisher. The tank that you take when you want to absolutely positively kill every mother feather in the room. I do like the Demolisher. I think its battle cannon's a bit swingy with the D6 damage, but it's hard to get upset with a weapon that is strength 14 and the AP 3 and D6 plus 3 shots. Thing about Demolisher that kind of separates it from the Eradicator, and both tanks are very similar. The Demolisher's line breaker ability, it might have a different name, but line for line does exactly the same thing as Urban Warfare on the Eradicator, allowing it to shoot its Demolisher cannon into combat with no penalty and all of its other weapons into combat with no -1. The thing that separates it from the Eradicator, though, is the range. It's only got a 24-inch range, where the Eradicator has got that 36-inch range, so if it can have the opportunity to do long-range Daka, it should take it. Demolisher, though, it's getting up close, it's getting personal, and it's gonna just chuck a flying dustbin down your throat whether you want it to or not. As a result, I think that there are two valid loadouts for this vehicle. I would go for a similar loadout to the Eradicator, where you go for the las cannon and the multi-melters. This just means that you are taking all of the biggest guns on this vehicle, and that's definitely valid because it's also the most expensive Russ. If you're spending 200 points on this tank, you might as well get the gold-plated option. The other thing, though, is to acknowledge the fact that it's got anti-tank covered. It's got big boom boom covered. It's got that main cannon. It doesn't need the las cannon or the multi-melters to help it blow away vehicles. What it kind of needs is ways of just shredding light infantry, just burning them to death. And so the other option is triple heavy flamer. Yes, you won't be quite as good against vehicles, but as you've got that covered, and what you can do is happily get into combat and potentially start spaffing out up to 18 automatically hitting shots. Another good thing about this loadout is you can benefit from Overwatch. No one wants to charge the Leman Russ Demolisher if it's got 3 heavy flamers on it, and Demolisher is almost guaranteed to be getting charged every game because of its short range. So either go for the Eradicator loadout, where you go for that las cannon multi-melters, or go for the triple flamer. After the Demolisher, we have another venerable data sheet, the Leman Russ Battle Tank. For those that don't know, the Demolisher, the Battle Tank, and I think technically the Exterminator were both variants that have been around since 2nd edition. Although the Exterminator, it did go away for a while, then it came back again, whereas the Demolisher and the Battle Tank have always been available to the Guard for multiple decades, which is pretty cool. But anyway, history lesson over. The Battle Tank is a long-range support unit. It wants to be sitting back and doing damage from afar. We're not talking flamers here. We're not talking multi-melters. If those weapons are in range, then something's gone wrong when it comes to this unit. Instead, we want to talk about putting a whole las cannon in the front. That's definitely the go-to every single time. It's got the range that goes well with the main gun, and whilst the main gun has got that nice flat damage 3, which can allow it to threaten vehicles, the strength 10 does mean that the heavier hulls it can struggle against. You sort of fish in for those 5 and 6s. Having that las cannon in the front means that you can take on the heaviest tanks, and it does make the Leman Russ a true sort of take-all-comers. Then we get to the sponsons. Now, in an ideal world, similar to the Vanquisher, you're going to want to go for those plasma cannons. But we need to give an honourable mention. Heavy bolters on the side are also pretty valid. Now, the reason why we want to put heavy bolters on the side is not because they're the best option right now in 10th, it's because it allows us to build the El Clasico. The El Clasico is a Russ that's got battle cannon, las cannon, and heavy bolters. It's the variant that you've been able to take since 2nd edition. It's never been the best, but it's never been the worst. It's always been viable. So if you're the kind of player that wants to, for whatever reason, glue your sponsons in, or maybe you've got one of the older kits, you've managed to get one new in box somehow, a treasured relic indeed, or you've bought an eBay rescue and it's come with a las cannon and heavy bolters on the side, or you're doing some restoration work and you're wondering what to put on it, I would suggest, if for whatever reason you have to go for a fixed loadout on the Leman Russ battle tank, you do go for battle cannon, las cannon, and heavy bolters, because it's edition proof. And 11th edition might come around, or there might be some balanced data slate that drops and suddenly plasma's not good anymore, and the heavy bolters will still be totally valid. I think that in an ideal circumstance right now, las cannon plasma is great, but it's important not to overlook the edition proof, the very, very venerable El Clasico. Next on the chopping block, we have the Leman Russ Executioner. This one's very straightforward. It's a long-range Dakka tank. It comes with a plasma gun on top. If you're gonna go plasma, you go all the way. I kind of see this in a similar vein as to the Punisher. There's no point in trying to multi-roll it. Just make it very good at its job, which is to blow away and utterly atomize so that they are naught but dust on the wind Marines and their equivalent. So you want to take plasma cannons on the side, and you probably want to put a heavy bolter in the front, which I know sounds crazy. One of the only times I'd say put a heavy bolter on the front, but it's more flat damage too. This thing is meant to just kill Marines and infantry and stuff like that. So just make it put out as much damage to shots as possible. The only problem with going all plasma on the Executioner is there is a chance that it is going to literally rattle itself to death with all the hazardous rolls. But fortunately, it's pretty cheap. I think this variant comes in at 160 points. I could be wrong, but if it kills itself, it's not the end of the world. Its main job is to be very, very threatening and to just pick up Marines and anything in power armor by the handful. And then we get to the second to last data sheet we'll be looking at today, which is the Leman Russ Exterminator, widely considered to be one of the best Leman Russes, if not one of the best tanks in the game right now. And what's not to like? Its ability, Withering Hail, is a fantastic force multiplier, adding extra AP where you need it, and then its main gun is truly take all comers. It's got the rate of fire, thanks to it being rapid fire 4, plus it's got twin linked, strength 9, AP -1, and damage 3, meaning it can threaten vehicles as well. Truly, it's a take all comers tank, and I would very much put this in the camp of being a longer ranged Dakka tank. You don't want heavy flamers or multi-melters on this. Really, it wants to be at that 24-inch range, just slamming shells into stuff and helping out the rest of your army. Therefore, I think it's only natural to put a las cannon in the front. The las cannon is going to give it some true extra AP and extra strength, a bit like with the battle cannon on the Leman Russ battle tank. Sure, it can probably deal with enemy vehicles with the main gun, but sometimes fishing for 5s, even with full rerolls and the twin link, they don't come up. So having that strength 12, that proper anti-tank punch, really does just guarantee you can get into tank duels without worrying too much. I would then say you want to go for plasma cannons. Now, this might upset some people, because a lot of people see the Leman's Exterminator as a traditional Dakka tank in a similar frame as the Punisher. Strap 3 heavy bolters to it, just have it scythe down hordes. That's what it does in the lore. Yeah. But hang on a second. The Leman's Exterminator has plenty of volume of fire from its main gun, and you've got the heavy stubber on there as well. Between those two weapons, if you're within rapid fire range, you're getting, what, 14 shots? That's plenty of Dakka. The las cannon, like I said, that really covers the base that it needs. Putting heavy bolters on the side of this vehicle doesn't actually make it that good at scything down hordes, because plasma cannons have blast. So if you take the heavy bolters, you're getting 6 shots. If you take the plasma cannons and you come across a horde army, even if it's just a 10-man squad, the minimum shots you're getting is 3. The average you're getting is actually 8 in total between the two guns. So, and then if you come across a 20-man blob, blast really starts kicking off. You could get as many as 14 plasma cannon shots. So if you want the Exterminator to do its traditional anti-infantry scything down horde mode thing, then actually you still want to go for plasma cannons. So in summary, my recommended Leman's Exterminator loadout is las cannon and plasma cannons. Finally, we get to the tank commander. I mean, he's in a Leman Russ, so I thought it would be right to cover him in this video. Now, he's a bit of an interesting unit because he can take any of the main turret weapons, and he can also take any of the sponsored and hull weapons. His ability is death befitting an officer. I'm kind of 50-50 on. On the one hand, it is great that if he dies, he's got a very good chance of just shooting back and doing damage to the enemy. But on the other hand, I'm not a big fan of abilities that only go off when a unit dies. I'd rather my unit went the whole game alive and was slamming shots into the enemy the whole time. So we're going to put death befitting an officer aside for a moment, and we're going to look at how we intend to use the tank commander. And really, he's there to do orders. And typically, he is there to do orders and support your other Russes. That's the main reason you're taking him, really. So it comes down to what tanks do you expect him to support? Is he going forward with the bruisers, with the short-range vehicles like the Eradicators and Demolishers? We'll give him a similar loadout. I would say in that situation, give him the Demolisher cannon, because if you're taking an expensive tank, you might as well give him an expensive cannon, and then either go for the triple heavy flamer, which, wow, that would probably really upset some people if they got close to your tank commander, used Overwatch on him, he burnt them with all of the flamers, then they charged in and they killed him, and then death befitting an officer went off and he burnt them again. There's a lot of flamer potential there, so that could be a good loadout for him. Or if he's likely to support your long range tanks, have something that mirrors that, and I would say go for the battle cannon, because the Exterminator cannon is good, but really you're taking that for Withering Hail. The battle cannon, it's a bit more take or come. That strength 10 does make a difference. Still got the AP and the same damage. And then I'd go for the las cannon and the plasma cannons on the sponsons and the hull. And that, my dear conscripts, covers all of the different loadouts that you can take on your Leman Russ tanks, from the lowliest Eradicator up to the mightiest Demolisher. But of course, all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Is there a particular loadout that I've missed, or do you have a secret sauce that you've been using and having great success with on the battlefield? If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and Patreons. You guys are amazing. Truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full time without the incredible and generous support of my members. So thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the Call of Duty. So a massive thank you to Bon Bon Vert, Mad Larkin, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, August Vardy, and the Tommies. Thank you guys. Your incredible support makes a huge difference, and it is a big part of how I'm able to do Mordian Glory full time. But that's all for now. Thank you for watching, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.